And before I introduce tonight's guest, I have a couple of announcements. The first one is a lot of you might have gone to or read about the Trayvon Martin demonstration that took place in New London last Sunday. And I just want to let people know that if you feel moved to follow up on it, you can contact your legislator to help create a better racial profiling law in Connecticut. If you go to the website of Community Party, they have language for improving that. The other announcement I just got, so it didn't get onto the community calendar, was that Lot is having a pancake breakfast fundraiser Saturday, April 28th from 8 to 11 a.m. at the VFW on Garfield Avenue. If you want tickets or info, the number is 443-2919. And without further delay, my guest tonight is Chris Newton from Baldwin Brook Farm. He is, among other things, a dairy farmer, and we're going to talk about milk primarily, but a lot of other kinds of farming also. The original idea had been to have someone from Fiddleheads on as well, but she got sick. But we have plenty to talk about with what Chris does with himself. So thanks for coming on, Chris.
You're very welcome, Ronna.
I guess I wanted to ask you, how did you become interested in dairy farming?
Well, that's kind of a long story. My wife and I originally are from the Midwest. My wife grew up on a dairy farm in Iowa, and I grew up in central Missouri. We both lived on farms, and just always had developed a love for agriculture. And our families both had big family gardens, and we always had fresh eggs and milk and a variety of sustainable items. So it was just kind of a lifestyle for us.
So what's the history of Baldwin Brook Farm? How long has it been in existence?
It's been in existence since late 2004. We bought the farm. It was not a dairy farm prior to that time. We are actually only the second owners of the property since the inception of the Indians.
Oh, wow.
It was owned for many, many years. The third owners. It was owned for many, many years by the Baldwins, and then from the 80s until we bought the farm by the Mayhews. And then, so we're the third owner since the inception of the property. And the Mayhews had beef cows. It was, they had registered Herefords.
So it was mostly a grazing
yes,
property?
We have a significant amount of pastures. And so when we bought the farm, we also bought our first milk cow. She was a registered Jersey that came from a very good buddy of mine in southern Rhode Island, Westerly area, by the name of Charlie Pansiera. And Bambi still lives and produces milk with us and amongst our herd today.
How long does a dairy cow live and be productive?
On our farm, they could live up to 20 years. In a typical confined dairy farm, which we see most milk being produced on in the U.S., typically once they become into lactation stage, maybe 3 years at the max.
Wow. So, yeah, that is not too healthier lifestyle for them, I'm guessing that transfers to the quality of the milk as well.
Right. Well, if you think about it, I forgot what the most recent statistic is, but somewhere between 80 to 85% of all milk that is produced in our retail grocery stores throughout the U.S. is from large confinement dairies where the cows are never ever touch a blade of green grass. I know there's been a lot of work done in the organic movement, even for pasteurized milk, that they're changing the requirements for organic certification, that the cows need to spend so much time and have so much access to pasture, because right now the regulations for organic certification, that's in terms of like Stonyfield or Horizon or any of these, well-known organic dairy cooperatives, that the regulations have been somewhat loose, so they could still be certified organic, feeding their cows all certified grains, but yet never getting access to green grass and pasture.
So you started out with the one cow.
One cow.
And
You've
grown.
We had one cow, and we had started out with one cow, and I think our first flock of laying hens was about 30, and our cow was producing roughly 10 gallons of fresh milk every day. Well,
that was probably a little more than you could use as a family.
A lot more. And we were both milk drinkers. So by making cheese and yogurt and a variety of other commodities, we were still having a lot of excess. And so kind of word of mouth spread that the Newtons had a dairy cow, and we did not realize that at the time that raw milk was such a hot ticket. We just had the family cow for ourselves. So word of mouth spread, and we kind of gave a lot of milk away at the time because you can't sell it unless you're licensed. So we gave a lot of milk away. And in the meantime, friends of ours that we met through this kind of network of people had a dairy cow that they wanted to get rid of because they could no longer milk it for a variety of reasons, and so asked me if I would like to take her on. Her name was Cosette, which we still have as well. And so I was milking Bambi and Cosette twice a day, in addition to going to my corporate job every day. And then we were making more milk, and then I decided that I would buy another cow. And at that time I was milking 3 cows twice a day by hand. And then my wife and
That could take quite a long time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was pretty fast though. By that time I was pretty fast. But we were making quite a bit of milk. And basically looked at it from a business perspective, and we decided to make an investment and work with the Department of Agriculture, who was wonderful in working with us and helping us make sure that we designed our dairy parlor and our milk house and all of our facilities that would meet the standards. We had heard stories that people had tried to do that but didn't get their input and advice. And so we decided to follow the regulatory route very close, and it worked out well for us.
So what's the licensing process if you want to start a dairy for specifically raw milk?
Get ready to plan to sink a lot of dollars. It starts with everything from proper septic systems, in order to drain all of the animal waste into, as well as all the milk solids. Even though you're bottling milk, when you're cleaning your bulk tank and all that stuff out, there's still food solids. So you have to have a proper septic system that is certified through the Connecticut, trying to not I'm trying to think what the word is, but
What is it, like the Department of Public Health gets involved?
Public
or
Health,
not?
yes, Department of Public Health gets involved, and then it's the DEM. It's like the DEM. And they come out and they assess it. The place where the cows have to be milked, it has to be all on concrete. You have to have certain wall texturings and fixtures. You have to have a mechanical system in order to milk the cat.
Yeah, you can't hand milk it
Not-
for licensing purposes, right?
Well, I think still in the state of Connecticut, you can still hand milk. I know some colleagues of ours that own a dairy over in the Litchfield area, that they, in their dairy, milk all their cows by hand, but I think maybe they were grandfathered in. But the facility that they milk their cows in is all concrete with running water and sewer piped and all that. It's just that they don't have the mechanical way of...
The reason I ask is when we first moved to Connecticut in the late 70s, we used to get our milk from a very small licensed raw milk operation in East Lyme with 4 cows. And they did not hand milk. The milk never touched human hands, and the place was all concrete and stainless steel. It was spotless.
Yeah, that's exactly what our facility is like.
So how many cows do you have now?
Well, all together with our milking herd and our heifers and young stock, all together I think it's about 30. But of course, we're not milking,
Right.
near that many cows.
Now, are they all Jerseys?
All Jerseys. We did have at one time a Holstein Jersey cross. That cow died 2 years ago, but I was able to get 2 offspring off of her, which are 75% Jersey and 25% Holstein. And we currently have one of those cows in our milking herd right now.
Now, why Jerseys?
First of all, my wife and I like Jerseys. They're smaller. They have a will to live. They're feisty, but they're good cows. They have a very high butterfat content, and they have
They're pretty. Jerseys and Guernseys are both very
high.
known for their butterfat.
Our butterfat typically runs over 5% for our butterfat content.
Now,
in our
what's
milk.
standard if you go to a supermarket?
Holstein herds, which is what a good chunk of the herds are in the United States, is around 3% butterfat.
So there's a
But
huge
they produce a
difference.
lot more milk. The Holsteins produce a much larger volume of milk, but a smaller amount of butterfat, which is why you see in a lot of the commercial dairy herds, they have a number of Jerseys in their herds as well, because that also helps bump up their premiums for what they're paid for in their milk, because in commercial milk production, you're paid premiums for your protein and butterfat, and so a lot of these dairymen these days have added Jerseys into their Holstein herds in terms of adding, because of the protein and butterfat content.
Now, if you go to a supermarket and you get milk, it's pasteurized and homogenized. Maybe you can talk a little about what those processes are and how it changes the milk.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. A typical milk that you would procure on a grocery store shelf is all pasteurized, meaning that the milk is produced on the dairy farm. There is a different set of standards that need to be followed in terms of milking and protocol for what we do as raw milk dairy farmers. The cows obviously are different farms have different protocols, but usually those are large farms and milk is being mass produced. So you don't have the time necessarily that we may spend on our small herd to make sure that cows are properly cleaned. But also there's not the incentive in those, the majority of pasteurized dairy farms to have the milk as clean, because everything everything in it is killed, and then they fortify back in all your vitamin D and vitamin A, and so it changes the complexity of the milk. In terms of nutrient value, there's statistical studies that show that there's not a lot of difference in terms of raw milk versus pasteurized milk. That is a topic that is certainly very well debated in today's world. So my point in saying that is there's no incentive for them to take their time, make sure the cows are spotless, sanitized very well, dried off.
I'm guessing the health of the cows is also not as observed as closely.
Absolutely. And then, I think that they do a pretty good job in managing their herds. They're managed in a different fashion than what we may manage. Just by sheer numbers, they have a lot more to deal with. But again, there's not the incentive of what is guided by milk quality is guided by what we call cell counts, and it's the amount of white blood cells in the milk. All milk produced has white blood cell count, and so depending on depending on what that cell count is a very good determinant of milk quality. So I want to say, don't quote me on this, but the maximum threshold for white blood cell count for dairy farms in the state of Connecticut, I think, is somewhere around 700 to 750,000, meaning that you have a tank full of milk that's ready to go to the milk truck is pulling up to the farm, getting ready to pump that milk out, and they take a sample of that. The white blood cell count in that cannot be any higher than 750,000, or the milk cannot go to the pasteurized plant, even though they're going to kill everything in it. And so,
they still don't want it to be hugely contaminated.
Right, even though they would kill everything in it and and fortify the good properties back in it, the maximum is 700 or 750,000. Typically, our cell count in our milk is majority of the time less than 100,000. And so my point in saying that is guided by, again, whether there's feces in the milk, whether there's urine in the milk, because, a lot of these dairy farms, cows are going to the bathroom while they're being milked, and, that's just a nature of that. When you have a smaller herd, the cows get a lot more individual attention. For the most part, our cows are pretty much trained that we very seldom even have them urinate or defecate in the parlor when they're being milked.
And they're outdoors a lot of the rest of the time.
Yeah, like this because we've had such a mild winter, our cows didn't stay one single night in the barn. Actually, the only two times they've stayed in the barn all year was when we had the hurricane in August for that storm. We put the cows in the barn that night during the day, and then I think they spent one night in the barn when we had the snowstorm.
Like an October storm.
The October snowtober, I think they call it. So, but typically, and the other thing, again, is you're right there with that cow and you're being able to work with her. And again, it's just a completely different scale. I would not go to a large dairy farm that is milking 60, 70, or 100 cows or 500 cows and drink raw milk from those farms, because not that they're not doing a good job, but it's very difficult to control what needs to be done in order to make sure that you have very clean, ultra, pure raw milk. Whereas when you're, milking 10 cows, it's, 3 cows in, they all come in with their names. They know their names. We have cowbells on all of them. it's just a different aspect of it.
Now, you talked about pasteurization. Now, if a person goes to buy raw milk, it's not homogenized and the cream rises to the
To
top.
produce raw milk in the state of Connecticut, you're not allowed to alter it in any form. So I cannot take any cream off of the milk and make the raw milk like skim raw milk or 2% raw milk. Raw milk in the state of Connecticut, as guided, is 100% raw milk. It comes directly out of the cow.
Oh, interesting.
In a non-contaminated source, is chilled down within 30 minutes, and it needs to be 34 degrees, between 34 and 40 degrees, and cool down. It's a rapid cool down, and bottled.
Yeah, and of course, if people want, when they get the bottle of milk home, they can
manipulate it all they want.
They can do what they want.
They can.
Now, homogenization has been sometimes seen as sort of controversial as well in terms of affecting the characteristics of the milk.
Yeah. I don't really, I'm not really comfortable or able to speak to those specific characteristics, but I will tell you that, there are a lot of pasteurized dairy farms now that are producing their own milk, bottling and producing their own milk, that is still obviously producing a pasteurized product, but it's non-homogenized. So there are...
Yeah, there's obviously a market if they are producing it.
I think the biggest component of that is it allows you, what happens is when it goes through the homogenization process, the fat globules are spun at a very rapid rate, and it breaks it down, and so that property is changed in the complexity of the milk. Whereas in the raw form, what happens is after the milk gets cold, the cream rises to the top, so you get a nice cream line that you can either shake up if you want to make it whole milk, or if you want to skim it and make whipped cream out of it, or skim it and make butter out of it, or it has many different. There's many different ways and methods that you can use the milk in the raw form.
Now, a couple years ago, I remember people were signing petitions to keep raw milk legal in Connecticut. Is there still a threat to the availability of raw milk?
I think there's always a threat. I think what has happened though, is the demand for the product is so high. People are becoming more educated. People are becoming more informed about supporting local sustainable agriculture. People are being more informed and being more concerned about what foods and what food types they're putting into their bodies. And so people are wanting to see, you're seeing this local food movement just burst. And with that is one of the hot items is raw milk. And I think that clearly over the course of the last 25 years, there have been two instances in the history of the state of Connecticut where there have been attempts for a couple of reasons to try to scale back the availability of raw milk. I know back in the maybe late 80s, early 90s, there was a situation where they wanted to ban it totally from not having the ability to be legalized and licensed in the state of Connecticut. And then I guess 2 years ago, there was an issue that surfaced that they wanted to no longer allow it to be sold in retail stores, but would still allow it to be sold on the farms where the milk was being produced. But being very involved in that movement and leading, our Dairy Alliance at that time in the state of Connecticut for raw milk, thousands of people band together, and letters were written to congressmen and legislators and the governor, and the hearings were very, very lengthy and basically did not stand a chance. And so the bill was that the Department of Agriculture at the time was recommending was defeated. It never even made it
And for
out of
someone
the-
like me, that's great because I live in New London. I can buy the raw milk at a place like Fiddleheads. I wouldn't be likely to be able to drive up to Canterbury every week to buy it.
That's right, and that was one of the points that was made by so many consumers throughout the state. And honestly, people even came from out of state that were involved in other states to try to help the Connecticut farmers and our customers. But yes, that's the problem, because I think right now there's maybe about 12 or 14 raw milk dairies. Maybe it's not even that much in the state of Connecticut. They're dispersed throughout. That it makes the traveling for people, to make it convenient. And I think that was one of the issues that what they wanted to do, is not make it convenient for people to be able to access it.
And it's hard enough for you all to make a living at it anyway without
Exactly.
making it hard to get it to the consumer.
We have a very, very loyal customer base on our farm, and we continue to just see new customers every day.
Oh, that is, we're at about the halfway point, so we're going to take about a 5-minute break and go to our community calendar. And then when we come back, we'll talk about some other kinds of products that that Chris raises over at Baldwin Brook.
Okay.
So we'll be back in about 5.
Thank you.
What I'm going to start out with is asking people or inviting people if they want to phone in. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
just try and make it on your own. Yeah, you gotta hit the ground running, hit it running, hit it running, you know. You gotta hit the ground running, hit it running, hit it running and go. You gotta hit the ground running, hit it running, hit it running, you know. You gotta hit the ground running, hit it running, hit it running and go.
Welcome back to Thinking Green. I'm here with Chris Newton from Baldwin Brook Farm. And we spent the first half talking about milk, specifically raw milk. And I want to invite you all to call in if you have questions about milk or any of the other kinds of products, farm goods that we'll be talking about. But I think we'll move on. You're welcome to call about milk, but I think we'll move on to chickens and eggs, because you had mentioned that was something you started out with from the get-go as well.
Yeah, well, I've been around chickens my whole life. My grandmother, who is in her middle to late 80s now, up until I think 2 years ago, had chickens her whole life. So it wasn't a large flock, but she always had 25 to 30 hens and provided the family and all of her kids and grandchildren with eggs. And so when we moved to the East Coast back in 2000, I got my first batch of chickens actually in about 2001. A much smaller flock, obviously, and I've had chickens every year since then. As we became, as our farm became more of as we transitioned from more of a hobby farm into a working farm, it became very clear to us, early on that we would need to have diversified products.
Sure.
In order to make it sustainable for us. And so one of the first things that we did during that time was look at the production of eggs. Clearly that is another hot topic that we've seen so much growth in the last decade and a half in terms of free range and all natural and organic.
I was going to ask you what they all mean.
And there is terms for each of those types that I discuss here. Obviously, I don't want to get into that tonight. That would be for a whole nother conversation. But we produce. I keep about 400 to 500 hens at all times.
That's a pretty big number.
And we get our hens are all free range. Like today, they're all out running around and cackling and scratching in the dirt and pecking bugs and doing what chickens love to do, making dust bowls and a variety of stuff. And our eggs, when you purchase them, they're very dark orange. In fact, if you go to our website, it says on there that Baldwin Brook Farm eggs have been termed as the best eggs ever because they have a very rich feel to them because of what the birds eat. They get all kinds of green grass and just natural things, and we do feed them a commercial laying ration as well. You have to in order to for chickens to have a properly balanced nutritional diet. And we didn't. I guess about 3 years ago, I built a much larger hen house that was a double-decker into a hillside, so that the hens on the top could go out in pasture on the top, and then the hens on the bottom level could go out, and it was built into a hillside. And So we were able at that time to accommodate a much larger flock. Up until that point, I was only able to accommodate about 50 hens.
Now, how much acreage do you need for 500 hens?
You don't need that much acreage at all. Probably an acre would be all you need for that. But again, it determines how you manage it, and we've been brought up and understand, and we've made mistakes too along the way. It's trial and error, and we still learn to make sure you get the right amount of chickens to the space that you have, to their ranging quarters. Otherwise you can develop cannibalism in the chickens where they peck each other, and once, chickens when they see, we want to mitigate all of that. If you look at our hens, they're absolutely beautiful. They, don't have a feather out of place, and so again, that goes to the management. Also, you need to be very concerned about the mites and lice that chickens get, which is a natural thing. Making sure that they have proper quarters so that they can get dust baths and dust themselves to keep their feathers and their oiler on their back of their tail feathers cleaned, so that it keeps their health. And if you've got healthy, happy hens, then they're laying healthy, happy eggs.
Now, do you have any favorite breeds?
I have a lot of favorite breeds, actually. But again, part of that comes into my favorite breeds are not always the best egg-laying breeds.
They're the best, companions
Either
or
they're
personality?
Yeah, well, the breed that we have is very friendly. You couldn't ask for a more docile hen. I just get kind of bored with the red chickens all the time. I like the black ones. Black Australopes are some of my favorites. I like Austria Whites, which is a hybrid vigored cross between a white Leghorn hen on a black Australope rooster.
Oh, wow.
I like the Araucana breeds, or the Americanas, which are known as the Easter egg chickens.
Right. The green.
I like a couple of the old-fashioned breeds, like the Barred Plymouth Rocks, or the White Rocks, Buff Orpingtons. Again, those are great breeds, but again, you have to look at it at times. You have to look at your bottom line and figure, you if you're going to do it and you're going to spend the energy, you have to have a hen that, first of all, has a good livability. How do they adapt to free-ranging quarters? How do they adapt to New England winters? How is their laying cycle throughout the year? And so there's all these variables that you have to take into consideration when determining the best breed. And clearly, I think you'll find a lot of people that produce free-range eggs that are organic in the state of Connecticut will probably say they like the red sex-link. We choose a particular breed of red sex-link called an Isa, which is one that I've raised now for several years, and I just like them very much.
Now, they lay brown eggs?
Dark brown eggs. They start laying at about 4 months old, and a lot of times some of the older breeds that we talk about lay a much smaller egg. And again, trying to figure out what our population and meeting customer demand and likes and dislikes. A lot of people like a big brown egg, and so when they see in a carton a big brown egg and then a small brown egg, they want the ones with the big brown. And so again, trying to just figure out a breed that has good dexterity of eggshell quality, a uniform egg in size, that is consistent.
Right.
We find that the Isas work great for our farm.
Now, I was wondering, is it more a seasonal thing, or do they lay through the winter as well?
Our hens, we usually get our pullets as day-old chicks, usually the end of June, the first part of July. And they come into lay usually in November, and then they lay all winter long. Solid, strong layers all winter long. Again, we've got good facilities where if it's nice days, they're out ranging. If it's cold and below freezing, they stay in the chicken house. And they're on pine shavings and nice yellow, dark straw in all the nest boxes, and good ventilation. And so again, chickens don't lay well if their feet are cold or they get frostbitten cones or whatever. So we have good facilities to accommodate all of those different temperature variabilities.
Now, do you have any trouble with predators?
We would. Our chickens get locked up every night. I have on all my hen houses screen doors that lock in the winter, in the summertime when it's hot, and so that we're not shutting them up in buildings where there's not good ventilation. And in the wintertime, obviously, we have wooden doors. I have all glass pane, old-fashioned New England style windows that can slide in and out depending on.
So it's raccoon-proof.
It's all raccoon-proof. No, yeah.
Now you sell chicken as well.
We do. In the last few years, we've also diversified our operation to include pastured poultry, as well as our heritage pastured pork and our Angus beef. And we usually do one big batch of free-range broiler chickens in the spring. We will probably be ordering them as day-old chicks within the next month, and we'll raise them for about 8 weeks, and then we will slaughter them, and then our customers order them in advance, and we have a pickup day at the farm, and we do that. I like to do that before it gets hot because the broilers have a difficulty tolerating the intense heat that we have, as summer progresses.
And you're inland from where we are,
right.
So the summer's probably
so it's a little
hot.
hotter. And then we raise our pigs. We work with a organic farmer that raises our piglets, and we get those at 8 weeks and usually in June.
Well, we have a phone call. Hi, thanks for calling.
Hey, Ronna, this is Dennis from New London.
Hi, Dennis.
I just came in on your show. I didn't realize the gentleman was talking about having a farm, but I thought it was maybe something to do with in the city here, that woman that had the chickens, and the city was telling her that she couldn't have chickens.
No, actually, the farm is in Canterbury, but it is true that in New London, backyard chickens are a hot topic.
I was wondering if your guests could tell me why would they not let people have chickens? Is there a disease reason or annoyance reason, or what? Why would they be against that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think the main issues that I've heard surrounding, first of all, this topic is a widely discussed topic all over the United States in many, many metropolitan towns about the keeping 3 or 4 and what is the right size. I think one of the biggest issues is the ban on roosters, that people don't want the crowing roosters because it could be a nuisance in the morning. Our roosters start crowing at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning.
And you probably don't have neighbors, right?
We don't have neighbors on our 80-acre farm, So plus you become acclimated to it and used to it. It doesn't bother me. Clearly, when the time starts changing, like now, you're up more and you notice it. But I think not really the disease issue. I think more of it is having to do with the use of cockerels, and I think they're trying to determine what the appropriate number in terms of flock size is, so that you don't run into disease problems, so that you don't run into contamination issues. I mean, clearly you've got to keep the hen houses clean. You've got to keep the grounds where they, roam. You have to
and not have a rooster to be a public nuisance.
Right, and so you need to. I think that's probably the biggest 2 issues, is determining what the appropriate flock size is, and whether or not to allow roosters or not to allow roosters, and also what type of caging arrangements and confinement issues will the town set for regulatory issues in terms of dogs running loose and killing people's chickens, and then you end up with a lawsuit because somebody didn't have their dog. I mean, it can become, so there are a lot of issues that need to be discussed. But I think overall, in my research, I'm seeing most towns becoming very favorable to what they call chickens in the city.
Yeah, and well, you talked about, sustainable farming and people wanting their stuff local.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't cost very much to have 2 or 3 chickens and, get 2 or 3 eggs a day, especially if they're young layers, For the first year, they'll lay you, if you've got 2 or 3 hens, they're going to lay you 2 to 3 eggs every day.
Which really, for family usage, might be just about perfect.
Perfect,
I had gotten some, I worked for a gentleman one time, and he had chickens, and he would give me eggs to take home, and I noticed a big difference in the taste with the fresh eggs than I did getting them from a store. I was amazed at the difference.
They probably look different, too.
The yolks are much darker yellows in the yolks.
And I assume that means the vitamin A content is probably a lot better.
The omegas, the omegas is much higher in free range and natural eggs.
All righty.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling, Dennis.
All righty. Thank you for your information.
Now, we only have about, 7 or 8 minutes left, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the beef and the pork. You mentioned that you have heritage varieties of pigs.
Yes.
How do they differ? Again,
It's going back to the breeding and how they grow and mature and how they adapt to their environment. Most pork that you will see produced in the United States today, if you would go to Walmart, Super Walmart, Stop and Shop, Big Y, most of that pork is confinement raised pork, meaning that the pigs are raised in large confinement facilities. Not that they're not treated well, not that they're not, fed properly, but again, they're in a confinement facility. So therefore, the needs of their nutritional needs and what they need in order to put weight on. So for example, everything in big ag industry is to have a pig that's developed to, eat a certain amount of food that's going to produce a certain weight at a certain period of time with this much cost, so that you can do it for the least expense and get the most out of it. And so that type of pig is much different than the type of pig we have. We have raised what is called a Tamworth crossed on a Berkshire sow. It's a Tamworth boar crossed on a black Berkshire. Both heritage breeds, been around a long time, and their snouts are much longer, which makes them very good in adapting for rooting. And so our pigs have about a 15-acre wood area that we rotationally graze them on, where they're constantly moved to new ground, digging up, eating acorns, root matter. I mean, they just can go in and clean up everything. And so, again, they work. It works very well, and and what it does is it produces a much leaner pork. The pork does not have a lot of fat in the fat back, in the bellies, where the bacon is produced. It's a much leaner. You get a lot more meat. The pigs don't weigh as much. The meat is much more flavorful. Much more flavorful. You can tell a huge difference. Again, you pay a lot more money for it. But again, it takes a long time. We raise our pigs from usually the end of May, first part of June, all the way through March of the following year. Whereas a pig produced for most commercial markets would be ready to go to market in 4 months.
Well, we only have about 4 more minutes, and I thought you mentioned on the website something about the health benefits of the meat from your cattle, beef cattle, and pigs. What's the nutritional difference?
It just has to do with the omegas, and again, the fat that the meat has in it. And I would just encourage that. I think that would be difficult to get into a whole discussion about that.
Especially in 3 minutes.
But I would just encourage people to go to the website at baldwinbrookfarm.com. Again, that's Baldwin Brook Farm, all one word.com. And go to the FAQs there, and you can pull all of that information up about the various meat products that we raise and about the milk, and it will go into a lot of detail, and it also has research sources that this information's been pulled from.
Now, I have 2 minutes, but I have a quick question. Do you do your own slaughtering and butchering?
No.
Or what does Connecticut offer in terms of
For our poultry, we
facilities?
do a lot of it, but in terms of being able to sell legally, all of it has to be USDA certified. And so all of our pigs are taken to a family slaughterhouse that we've been doing business with for many years up in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And my wife or I accompany the animals to make sure that they're being handled properly, to make sure they're not being disturbed, and oversee the process and make sure that our meat is being made to the quality and standards that we desire. If we did not do that, then we would not be able to market our meat. That's just a U.S., United States, U.S. Department of Agriculture standard. If you're going to sell meats retail, you have to follow USDA standards.
Well, we're out of time. Thanks so much for coming on,
You're
Chris. And we'll hopefully bump into each other at Fiddleheads at some point.
Absolutely.
And I know people can come up to the farm, give you a call, and visit.
We are open. The farm is open Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. We're closed on Thursdays. We're open Fridays and Saturdays and closed on Sundays. And we're open. There's always somebody at the farm. The farm store's open.
And people can see the animals.
The animal people can have a farm tour, see the animals, and see what we're all about. And I encourage anybody to come by.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but tune in, and we'll be happy to see you. And thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Ronna.